Good afternoon, everybody. How are we doing? Senator Steve Drazkowski. We are here today, a bipartisan, bicameral bill and effort around bringing forward a strong deterrent for and the ability to take back all of the taxpayers' money that's been lost to fraud. We're calling it the Take It Back Act. And I will just remind you that fraud is out of control in Minnesota and has been for more than a decade. I remember talking on the House floor in 2016 about the then legislative auditor's report about the 2014 and 2015 medical assistance fraud. Back then, they took a segment of the population of medical assistance enrollees and discovered that there was $271 million that were being lost to waste, fraud, and abuse. And that was in 2016. 2018, the CCAP fraud. Remember discussions about, I think there was confirmations that were $7 or $8 million that left the state of Minnesota and went in suitcases overseas, ostensibly CCAP money. At the time they were talking about, there was discussions and allegations of somewhere around $100 million or more. 2020, feeding our future in Minnesota, $300 million so far of known fraud in feeding our future. And the media is here. Carol Levin recently found and put together a summary of stating that Minnesota has spent $20 billion with a B on Medicaid programs at high risk for fraud since 2018. $20 billion that we've spent on high risk programs for fraud since 2018. So currently we're seeing the allegations of $9 billion in fraud in 14 state Medicaid programs in Minnesota. Over $300 million, as I mentioned, stolen in the Feeding Our Future program. Over $100 million in the last 10 years in CCAP fraud. Minnesota has become, ladies and gentlemen, a fraud destination for government fraud. We have coined the term fraud tourism. The state of Minnesota has. Sadly, those are realities of where we are today. Also, sadly, most of the money stolen from hardworking Minnesota taxpayers will never be recovered. So far, only $66 million of the $300 million, that's 22%, known to be stolen in the Feeding Our Future program has been recovered. Much of the money has been laundered many times, multiple times, using shell companies to hide the money. Just a few examples of where the rest of the money went. $1 million luxury mansion in Plymouth, a foreign textile and trading company investment, Mediterranean coastal property in Atlanta, Turkey, Brooklyn Park Bar, bought a beach resort in the Maldives. I don't even know where it is. Maldives. Apparently it's not in North America. A Porsche, a Tesla, newly built apartment complex in Kenya, gold jewelry from Dubai, a resort in Kenya, commercial property in Lakeville, aircraft in Kenya, an aircraft. One crook even laundered the money, a little levity here, ladies and gentlemen, even laundered the money, $20,000 through the purchase of a laundromat. The two questions I get asked most when I talk to people in my district, they say, Draz, what are we going to do with all the fraud and how are you going to get our money back? Minnesotans just have no confidence in Twin Cities judges to hold these fraudsters fully accountable. Ask Judge West, who let two convicted fraudsters run free. Convicted fraudsters ran free after they stole $7.2 million of the people's money. We have little faith in the ability for the governor or the attorney general to act on it. As a matter of fact, those two politicians were here and supervised the fraud that we've seen. We need to take the taxpayers' money back. We need to create a much stronger deterrent for the thievery of taxpayers' money in our state. This bill we are talking about today is one way to do what the people are asking us to do, to make the taxpayers whole and get our stolen taxpayer money back. Our bill creates a brand-new 100% tax on any money obtained through government fraud. If you stole money from the state, you owe every dollar back to Minnesota as a tax, on top of any criminal penalties or restitution you already paid. If you are convicted of a fraud crime by a state or federal court, if the Department of Revenue determines you have committed fraud, if you receive a payment from a fraudster as an accomplice, you will reimburse the taxpayers for your crimes. We'll use this to finally give Minnesotans a relief they have been begging for. The proceeds will be deposited in a tax relief account to be used only for income and/or property tax relief for Minnesotans. The people earned this money the old-fashioned way, through hard work. They deserve it back. And I'll turn it over to Representative Anderson.
Thanks, Senator Drazkowski. I want to start this bill 4950. When we first got the jackets, I gave it around to some folks on the tax committee, and I started talking to Democrats. As you may know, I'm on the fraud committee, and most of the Democrats on the fraud committee have signed on to this bill. In fact, there are 11 Democrats in the House that have signed on to the bill, and the bill is full. We have 35 authors. I'm going to be cloning this bill, and I believe we'll have another 35 authors. Because people, no matter what party you are, no matter what part of the state you represent, people are angry about the fraud. They are angry about the dollars that have flown out the door. They are angry about, frankly, services that are probably going to be cut because the dollars are going to fraudsters or have been going to fraudsters. People are angry about the taxes that they're paying and all the $10 billion that taxes were raised over the last couple of years. They're angry about that when they see all these dollars going to fraud. Today is tax day. It's April 15th. And people are writing checks, if they haven't already, to the state and to the feds. And imagine, how you feel, how we all feel about writing taxes or writing checks when we know that the state has lost $9 billion to fraud. Senator Drazkowski and I are talking with the Department of Revenue about this. This is a serious bill. This is not a messaging bill. This is very serious. And we're talking to the Department of Revenue about, what's going to be the easiest way for them to implement this. We have a hearing in taxes on the 30th. So this bill already has a hearing. It will, I'm sure, be passed out of taxes because there are many Democrat and Republican members on the tax committee that are authors on this bill. So it'll move forward. It may take there may be an amendment to make it more of a, just in talking to the Department of Revenue, to make it more of an addition to income. So it's more like, like you didn't pay your taxes on the dollars that were fraudulent. Because we want this to work without having the Department of Revenue have to, do anything new. And so that will evolve over the next week before we hit our tax committee and hit our hearing. But our goal is to pass this because the people in Minnesota, they want their money back. And it's our job as legislators to do everything we can to make that happen. So that's what this bill is about, and we'll take questions. So thanks.
It's bipartisan. Where are the Democrats?
Well, I don't know. I tried to get them to come. They were all invited. So Elkin said he has health until 2:45. I said, well, just leave. So, but I would encourage you to ask any of them, to talk to any of them that are on the bill. There are 11 Democrats on the bill.
Especially in the House.
In the House,
is incredibly important.
Senator Rust is it's on the bill in the Senate. And I know that Representative Drazkowski is talking to other, do you want to, Democrats?
Yeah, we only have 5 slots on the bill in the Senate, so we filled it up rather quickly. I've talked to some other Democrats that are interested in signing on. I may do a clone as well. So, if we can get some momentum, and I think we can, we've got a hearing scheduled in the House, and hopefully we can get one in the Senate as well and get this bill moving.
When's your hearing?
In
the Senate. I heard
Oh.
yours in the House.
We don't have one
Oh, you
yet.
don't have one in the Senate?
Yep.
Right.
Okay.
The bill was just dropped last week. The tax bills have to start in the House, as you know. So we do have a hearing on the 30th.
Are you aware of any other states doing anything like this?
No, I'm not. Unfortunately, at least from a public perspective, the fraud problem in Minnesota is.
We don't know of any other states that have this problem
Right, yeah,
to this extent.
yeah.
Can you talk about this and I guess how it relates to, as I understand, I mean, the DHS even separate from criminal investigations can do some clawback of some money, and then certainly there is a recovery in some of the criminal cases. But there's only so much that I think prosecutors can recover in terms of some of the stolen funds. So how would that impact the calculation? And then are you seeing this as kind of like a surcharge on top of what, taking back as much as you can from what was stolen, if that makes sense?
Yeah, so we have people who have received kickbacks and bribes in these fraud schemes. I'm not aware of any of them that have been convicted so far. I'm not aware of any of them that have been indicted so far. I'm guessing they're probably on the lower part of the food chain of the kind of the criminal pursuit around this. And they may never be held accountable, who knows, depending on what law enforcement can and does do. But the bill doesn't care what the criminal side does, and the people of Minnesota want their money back. They want all of it back. And this is an effort to take it back. We don't have anything in the bill to say if you had to pay restitution for your crime that the Department of Revenue is gonna stop chasing you. The bill, as it's written now, says the Department of Revenue will go after 100% of the fraud. So, of course, we've got, go ahead.
You know, wouldn't the criminal investigations impact this, right? Because how else would the Department of Revenue know if it's fraud or not?
Yeah, well, they would know from the criminal investigations for sure, but they would also learn from some of their data analytics and some of their IRS sharing data and some of the other things that they have access to, which is, you know, outside of the normal criminal network.
Have you talked to like CMS at all? Because some of this obviously is, coming from the federal government originating, like, would they want any share of the tax or?
I don't think we're gonna give it to them. It belongs to the people of Minnesota. You know, the bill's, and back to your question, the bill's gonna receive some hearings. So this is the first draft of the bill. It very likely will change as it goes forward. Maybe that's something that's a consideration. Maybe somebody will wanna consider, you know, if you had so much restitution, then that gets removed or something. I don't know. That wouldn't be my intent, but who knows what the product will be down the road.
Kind of following up on Caroline's question, so like if you've got, just to use round numbers, somebody who stole $10 million and they're ordered to pay restitution of $8 million, and you've got this, gap of $2 million. Do you know how big kind of that gap is in the universe of fraud that we're seeing in Minnesota? Like how much is not getting recovered through criminal investigations?
As I mentioned, in Feeding Our Future, out of the 300 million that was stolen, so far 66 has been retrieved. So far. So 22%.
Is there concern that it would be hard to practically implement this? I know Representative Anderson talked about maybe not adding too much for the Department of Revenue, but, these are people who are fraudsters, who are good at hiding their money, who, you can only get 66 million back of the 300 million, some of it is unrecoverable. So like, to get a real sense of like, how much you're taxing here, I guess is my question.
So the way the bill is drafted, if you read it, it's for people who've been convicted of fraud. So I just want to point that out. So that was to your earlier question. I guess, the thing that comes to my mind is, okay, they're paying restitution of 20% or something. That's what the courts charge. It's the other 80% that will, it's the whole 100%, but those are the dollars. So how does the fraudster pay that back? This is a tax. And they essentially won't pay, they either have to pay their tax or they're gonna have the, this is gonna get garnished, or they're gonna go after assets, they're gonna go after all sorts of things, or they're gonna end up in bankruptcy. I mean, that's essentially what would happen, right? But that's okay. That's okay, because we have to do everything we can, to get every dollar back that we can for the citizens of the state. Regarding the CMS thing, this is a separate thing, this is a state tax. This is essentially a state penalty on people who have stolen money from the citizens of Minnesota, whether that's Medicaid dollars that came from the feds. It's still, Minnesotans still pay, right, into Medicaid. And we know Medicaid has issues with funding. There's, could be going belly up, and this is probably a big part of the reason. So it's still Minnesotans paying these taxes.
What about the money that's recovered when it comes in? Is it coming into the Department of Revenue as an income tax? Could it be a dedicated fund that's used or repurposed? And does the bill deal with that?
Yeah, so so right now it creates a new tax. So you remember before, new income tax. Well, it's an excise tax, it's a type of income tax. But you remember before we had any legalization of marijuana in the state, there was still a tax on marijuana, even though it wasn't legal and you weren't supposed to be doing. So this is somewhat analogous to that. You're not supposed to be doing, this is a crime, and if it happens, there would be a tax on it. Now, the department has said they would like to maybe turn it into a penalty. It would be easier to administer, so that's what Senator Anderson are gonna be meeting with the department on how to make it so it works best for them from an administration standpoint. We don't want it to cost them all kinds of extra resources and stuff. Back to the federal question.
Can I come back to that real
Yeah.
quick too? And just general fund, or would there be any thought of dedicating or earmarking this
Well,
money?
right now we create and certainly as the bill proceeds, that'll be discussion, where does the money go, you mean?
Or
So-
a rebate when you say it goes back to
Well,
the citizens?
we put in a tax relief fund. Right now, the bill creates a tax relief fund and puts it all in there. And so, that might be some of the discussion about the federal stuff, because Feeding Our Future was federal money too. And half of the Medicaid money is federal money, half of it's state. So some of that's a discussion and deliberation, maybe that needs to happen in committee with the bill. But this is a first effort at bringing forward a bill that is a novel idea that Minnesotans are begging for.
Do you have time? You talk about being a novel idea, it's gotta go through the House, originate there, then the Senate. Are you worried about time? Just a month left?
Patty's worried.
No, yes, as I say, why isn't anything getting done yet? Well, I mean, in fact, nothing is getting done yet, right? Or nothing's completed. So there's been a lot of hearings. We have a hearing in the tax committee. That's the only place this needs to go. Regarding the fund that it sets up, it doesn't say where those dollars would go, and that's something that, could be decided by, through committee, or could be decided by a future legislature, frankly. And frankly, from my perspective, it doesn't matter so much to me as long as it goes to Minnesotans, as long as we get the money back. And that doesn't have to be a part of the legislation, but this can be a standalone tax bill. It doesn't even need to be part of an omnibus tax bill. And it can, tax bills start in the House, and we can pass this and send it over to the Senate.
No, I was just gonna ask, this is the only tax increase that Republicans are supportive this year? Okay.
Yeah.
It was kind of the last question, so.
How do you adjudicate like somebody who has benefited from a fraud scheme but hasn't been convicted? I mean, I assume before you could garnish their wages, there has to be some kind of due process so that they can say, no, I didn't actually benefit from this fraud scheme. How does that process work?
That's something that actually someone did bring up to me, and another legislator, Democrat legislator, actually, they were trying to figure that out, and benefit in the sense of if you work for a company that did, that was fraudulent, but you weren't aware of that, and you had wages. So those folks are not going to be convicted of fraud, so someone who's a line item employee. So we need to make that very clear, and as we are going through this, next week and a half, because it's a short bill, we need to make sure they're not caught up in it. We're not trying to catch up, someone that may have worked for a company, didn't know what they were doing. It's really the owner of the company, an individual who defrauds, like the food, you know, the SNAP thing that's been in the press in the last couple days, you know, that's an individual, right? So, yeah, so that's what we're targeting.
Let me respond too. So in the bill, in addition to convictions, we do include the ability of the commissioner. So it says if an individual organization that the commissioner has determined to be obtained by fraud. So, you know, when remember, you're talking about the Department of Revenue and Taxes here. They don't have the police come forward and say that you owe taxes because you got this income over here. That's the Department of Revenue using their methods to ascertain that you have that revenue. There is a mechanism in the bill for appeal, that you could appeal through the normal tax court process, and that's in the bill as well. So it's beyond the scope of just convictions, at least the way it's written, but of course, that'll be discussed as it moves forward as well.
Back to Caroline about Republicans supporting tax increases, do you have like a
haven't-
gentleman's agreement that you guys won't use this against each
I
other?
haven't
Like,
voted for a tax increase in 19 years. In 19 years, I've never put my name on a tax increase bill, and this is the first one.
but have you guys honestly talked about it heading into campaign season for those of you running again, that you won't use it against each other?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know, we haven't got that far yet, but certainly that's part of the discussion.
Can I just say, you know, there are some very conservative legislators on this bill. Very, okay, including the guys that had the ethics complaint. A bunch of them are on here, right? The thing early today, which I missed because I was on taxes, I wanted to watch it, but, so I don't think that's a fear for any of us. So if we can tax fraudsters 100% to get the money back for our citizens, I think we are united, no matter what part of the political spectrum we're on, in doing that, so. There he is. Representative Elkins, please, they said, where's the Democrat? And I said, oh, get one, maybe. I know, everybody, yeah. Representative Elkins is on the fraud committee, and so I've been working with them for the last 2 years, and I don't know if you want to just say something quick on the bill, we just talked about it, quick and.
It's real quick. I thought it was a really clever idea.
to the?
Yeah, thank you.
It's a really clever idea. It's kind of like that old drug tax that we had on illegal drugs. So who knows if it'll ever get enforced, but it can't hurt anything. And I thought it was a really clever idea. Yeah.
Any other questions? So, thank you all.
I got one thing.
Oh,
So, members of the press, if there is a website out there, mnfraudfiles.com. Check it out. It's got all kinds of information about fraud. I'm sure you've been scouring the planet for this stuff, so we call it the Take It Back Act.
yeah,
Thanks.
thanks for coming. Thanks.